Gildan Media, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Tokens, 11 Lessons to Help Build the Foundation of Success and Find Your Path to Greatness, by Dr. Greg S. Reid and Jeff Levitan. Narrated by Noah Michael Levine. Publisher's Note: Limit of liability/disclaimer of warranty. While the publisher and author have used their best efforts in preparing this book, they make no representations or warranties with respect to the accuracy or completeness of the contents of this book, and specifically disclaim any implied warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. No warranty may be created or extended by sales representatives or written sales materials. The advice and strategies contained herein may not be suitable for your situation. You should consult with a professional where appropriate. Neither the publisher nor author shall be liable for any loss of profit or any other commercial damages, including, but not limited to, special, incidental, consequential, or other damages. Chapter 1. Secrets in the Walls. The trip to town had taken Eric longer than he'd expected. He had set out that morning to run to the hardware store to get some more supplies for the cabin. But one thing had led to another. After a quick stop at the bank, he pulled into the grocery store to replenish some staples. Coffee, eggs, bread, and something to throw on the grill for the next couple of days should do it. Then he received a call from his boss and had to make a quick run to their job site to meet the drivers who were delivering the roof shingles they needed first thing Monday morning. When he turned off the main road, it was already midday, and Eric was thinking about how half of his day had been wasted. Another weekend was flying by, and he wasn't making much progress on his grandfather's old cabin, but it was a labor of love, particularly because, as a boy, during the summers, he had spent a month there with his grandfather. He had enjoyed every minute spent fishing with his grandpa, and now that his grandfather was gone, he intended to spend even more time there. In fact, he was renovating it and building an addition onto the back to make it even larger. When he was finished, the cabin and the acreage it sat on were going to be Eric's home. The unmarked road was little traveled, and, with the exception of the people who owned the other cabins along the lake, traffic was rare. The road twisted and turned, giving the properties even more privacy as it took the residents further into the countryside, which was as scenic as it was reclusive. As Eric's truck wound around a curve, he noticed a car pulled up into the cabin to the north of his grandfather's property. That's funny, he thought. I've been staying here for a couple of months and have never seen anyone there before. On a whim, Eric turned into the gravel driveway. As he neared the cabin, he noticed an elderly man sitting on the front porch, who quickly rose to greet him. "Hi there," he said. "Eric Schultz. I'm staying in the cabin just down the road. I haven't seen you here before, so I thought I'd swing by and introduce myself." "Good to meet you, young man," the gentleman said. "The name's Carl Vaughn." "It's great to have a neighbor. I've often wondered who lived here. Do you live here, or is this your summer cabin?" "Well, I guess you could say it's like a summer cabin. Actually, my friends and I have been coming here to hunt and fish for many years. It's going to be sad to see the place go, but it's time," Carl explained. "Oh, are you going to sell the cabin?" "Well, I don't think there's all that much to sell. The cabin itself hasn't been updated since I bought it 40 years ago. It's probably not worth anything to anyone, except myself, so I figured I'd knock it down and sell the land. It's a nice piece of property, and I'm sure some young person like yourself could build something nice here and start anew." "Tear it down?" Eric asked, shocked. "But these old wood cabins are historic. They belong here. Besides, they don't make them like this anymore. As a matter of fact, I'm adding onto my grandfather's cabin and want to keep it as authentic as possible, but there's no way I can match the old logs and stones. The old wood floors are in decent shape, but some boards are rotted. If I could save them, I would. But it's not looking good. There are just so few places like these old cabins anymore." "I admire your passion, son," the old man said. "But the place is getting to be an eyesore. Besides, I just don't have a use for it anymore. Unfortunately, a couple members of the old gang have passed on. The rest of the fellows have retired and settled down. Over the years, we've come here less and less. We haven't hunted the land in years, although last year we threw a hook and a line in a time or two. In reality, the last time we all got together was mostly for sentimental reasons. A trip down memory lane, so to speak." "Mr. Vaughn, I'd hate to see the cabin get torn down. I'm a builder, a craftsman in the construction trade, and I could help you get this place fixed up if you'd like," Eric offered. Carl stood and opened the door. "Please, come in. Let's get out of the sun and talk." They sat at the kitchen table, and Carl poured them each a glass of iced tea. "I'd like to thank you for your offer," Carl said. "But I want to get the property ready to sell. You see, I recently sold my business. My wife and I are relocating. It's time to enjoy our time together and spend it with our grandchildren. I will admit, though, that I'm going to miss this old cabin," he said, looking around. "Oh, if these walls could talk." "Oh, yeah? I take it you and your friends had some good times here," Eric replied. "Yes, good times indeed. You see, this place wasn't just a fishing cabin. It wasn't just any old cabin. It was the people in the cabin that made it what it was. We hunted here, we fished here, and we made plans here. Big plans, mighty big plans." "What kind of plans?" Eric asked. "You name it, we planned it. Businesses were born here, son. Ideas became multi-million-dollar inventions. At times, there was more motivation, inspiration, and debate in this room than there was when the Cubs finally made it to the World Series. Eric, while most guys leave a fishing trip with tall tales about the big one that got away, we left this cabin with tall goals that we never let go of. Oh, if these walls could talk, the tales they would tell." "Wow, I'm really impressed," Eric said, looking around the cabin. "Now that I know that, it seems even more of a shame to tear this cabin down. It seems like you'd want to preserve some of its history and all those memories." "All those memories are preserved, I assure you. They're now on store shelves. They're features in automobiles. They're part of technology and medicine. It wasn't the cabin that inspired them. It was the great minds that visited here, all working in synergy to support and advise each other. We were quite a team, young man, quite a team." Eric paused, letting his new friend reminisce for a moment. Then he got an idea. Mr. Vaughn, excuse me, but I'd like to make you an offer." "You want to buy this cabin?" "Oh, no, I'm sorry. Actually, I was thinking that I would be happy to tear it down for you, for free. You'd get what you want, and it wouldn't cost you a dime. The only thing I'd ask is that you let me keep and preserve as much of it as possible. I'd love to incorporate the history of this cabin into my cabin. I could use some of the materials, and I assure you, I'd take great pride in knowing that I was able to preserve such an important piece of your past." Well, that is something to think about. I can certainly afford to pay someone to take the cabin off my hands, but if you're serious, I'd actually prefer to let you knock it down, and I think the fellows would agree. I came here this weekend to remove some of the items I want to keep, but I was going to leave other furnishings and items behind. If they're of any interest to you, you're welcome to anything you can use," Carl offered. "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much," Eric said, shaking the gentleman's hand. "I promise I'll get to work on it as soon as you're ready, and I'll clean the site up when I'm done. It will be all ready to go on the market. Just let me know when I can get started." Eric jotted down his name and phone number on a notepad he found sitting in the center of the table, grateful that he'd followed his instincts and stopped by to introduce himself. The materials from the cabin could be repurposed for the addition and would fit in with his grandfather's cabin quite well. That made Eric think of something. "Hey, Mr. Vaughn, since you've been here so long, did you know my grandfather, William Schultz? Since your properties are side by side, had you two ever met?" "Oh, yes, young man. I did know your grandfather. I only saw him once every few months, for a couple of days at a time. But yes, we knew each other. As a matter of fact, back in the day, we hunted and fished a time or two. Your grandfather had a great mind, Eric. I admired William very much, and he spoke highly of you, though I'm sure you were a young lad back then." Smiling, Eric chuckled. "I'm sure I was. Thank you. That means so much to me," Eric said. "I'll leave you alone now. Just give me a call about when I can start. In the meantime, if you need anything, I'm just down the road." Watching Eric's truck back out of the driveway, Carl thought about what had transpired. Although he'd just met the young man, he liked him. In fact, there was something about Eric that reminded him very much of William, who had been a good friend and neighbor whenever Carl had visited the cabin. Eventually, William even became a member of the mastermind group that had met in Carl Vaughn's cabin for decades. It was a closed group, a secret group in many ways, and most people believed they were just a group of guys who got together for a man cave kind of weekend. But it was more, so much more. It's too bad, Carl thought, these walls can't talk. It was a shame that the secrets to their successes couldn't be passed on, especially to Eric. William would have liked that. Then Carl had an idea. Pulling his keys out of his pocket, he went to the old desk under the living room window and unlocked the center drawer. Reaching in, he pulled out a metal box and set it on the table in front of him. With one turn of the key, it opened, and Carl reached in and picked up a handful of tokens. Maybe, just maybe, these walls can talk, he thought, smiling. Chapter 2. Dreams of Business. The next morning, Eric sat down with coffee to plan his week. He expected to finish the addition to the Bradford house before the end of the week, but he didn't have any major projects lined up after that. With the exception of a few small jobs that often were passed on to him by larger general contractors, business was slow. Looking for work wasn't new to him, but it wasn't something he enjoyed having to do. He'd always loved building things, and it started at a young age. From birdhouses to porch benches, he had developed his craft. When he got out of high school, he became an apprentice for a builder and worked on actual homes. The end product was always the source of pride for him, and he knew this was what he wanted to do with his life. However, Eric wanted to own his very own company. He didn't want to work for someone else like his father had all of his life. He wanted to be more like his grandfather, who had been a successful business owner. Eric always admired his grandfather's lifestyle and often wished his father had followed in those footsteps instead of punching a time clock without any real chance of getting ahead. The security and stability that would come from owning his own business enticed him to become an independent contractor. He'd always been a hard worker and someone who took pride in doing a good job. He was a stickler for details and always strove for perfection. But after 8 years in the business, Eric still struggled to compete with large contractors. He simply didn't have the crew to take on big projects. But he knew that until his business grew, he couldn't keep a crew working or afford to pay them. Eric was aware that part of his problem was a lack of business acumen. He was a master craftsman, but he simply didn't have the business background to grow from a one-man operation into a successful and busy general contractor. It would be nice if Grandpa was here, he thought. Then I'd have someone to turn to for advice. His grandfather had always been a role model and mentor. Whenever they spent time together, he shared his wisdom with Eric. Work smarter, not harder, he'd say. Don't be afraid to take risks and learn something new. Be willing to ask for advice. The list went on. When Eric's grandfather offered advice, Eric listened. But he had been young, and while he admired his grandfather deeply, he just wasn't ready for the lessons at the time. But now he was, and he wished he'd paid more attention. His grandfather had experience and knew how to grow a business and build a customer base. Eric was certain that he could have turned to him and learned what he needed to do to become a successful business owner. With a sigh, he resigned himself to the fact that he'd just have to figure it out for himself. Hopefully, he'd be able to do that before circumstances forced him to resort to working for someone else. After lunch, Eric went to work on the cabin. At least he wouldn't have to replace all the flooring, he thought. If Carl let him take what he wanted before the cabin was torn down, he'd be able to replace the areas of the floor that were irreparable with salvaged boards. After sanding them down and refinishing them, they'd be a perfect match, and no one would ever know they weren't original to the existing structure. First, though, he needed to upgrade the electricity and plumbing, which weren't up to code. He'd just begun to replace the pipes behind the shower wall when the phone rang. "Hello," he answered. "Eric, it's Carl Vaughn. How are you today?" "Good. And you?" "Fine, thank you. As a matter of fact, I think I've gotten everything done here, and I've packed everything I need to take with me. So, you can start taking anything you need tomorrow if you're ready." "Oh, so soon?" Eric replied. "Well, good. I will try to work quickly. And, sir, thank you again. I really appreciate your kindness." "The pleasure is mine, son. But there is one thing I ask in return." "What's that?" "I've left an envelope here for you, where you will find my contact information, as well as a little gift from me for volunteering to demolish this old place. Let's just call it a token of my appreciation. Oh, and you'll also find a note from me with a bit of, shall we say, instruction on what I'd like you to do," Carl said. "Thanks so much," Eric said. "But you didn't have to do anything or give me anything. Letting me use what I can from the cabin is payment enough." "Consider it a gift. Just promise me that you will use it wisely," the old man replied. I can promise that. I will stop by tomorrow after work and get started. Will you be there? Nope. I'll be leaving here shortly, but I'll leave the key under the mat. I'd like you to keep me up to date on your progress and let me know if you need anything. Take your time, though. There's no big rush to sell the land. It's not going anywhere, he laughed. After they hung up, Eric thought about their conversation. It was mighty generous of the old man to let him take anything he wanted out of the cabin, but he'd also left something for him, a token of appreciation. It was a thoughtful gesture, but one that left Eric more than curious about what it might be. He figured he'd just have to wait until tomorrow to find out. Picking up his pipe wrench, he went back into the bathroom. Eric made great progress on the addition he'd been working on, and it looked like the job would be finished on time. He'd spent the day hanging the drywall and getting it taped. Tomorrow it would be ready to mud and sand. Satisfied that he'd done as much as he could, he packed up his tools and headed home, remembering that he first had to stop at Carl's cabin as he'd promised. Even though Eric knew no one was home, he knocked before hunting for the key and opening the door. True to his word, Carl hadn't taken much. He'd left behind the kitchen table and a couple chairs. The old desk still sat in the corner, but it looked like all the personal items had been removed. There were no pictures or mail lying around as far as he could see. Eric would make sure he talked to Carl to see if he was coming back for anything or would like the things he had left behind put in storage. On the table sat an envelope with his name written in large letters across the front. Sitting in one of the chairs, Eric picked it up and broke the seal. Reaching in, he pulled out a sheet of paper. Eric, years ago, this cabin was the meeting place for some of the best business minds I've ever known. Your grandfather was one of them. Our meetings were by invitation only, and there was an entry fee. Every time a successful business owner joined us, he would be asked to trade one of his success tips for every prized trophy he bagged. Over the years, we accumulated quite a few prized trophies. The fish and game here were as plentiful as the business discussions, I assure you. I promised that you could have anything in this cabin. The collective knowledge of your grandfather and the other members of our little club, shall we say, is more valuable than anything else that is or was in this cabin. So, I want to pass it on to you. In this envelope you will find one of those tips, each of which were engraved on wooden tokens. I chose this one specifically for you because your grandfather, who had a bright mind and was generous about sharing his knowledge, contributed it. He would have wanted you to have it. All I ask, Eric, is that you use this business tip wisely. Learn about it and apply it to your business and your life. When you feel you have done that, send me a note or an email telling me what this tip means to you and how it has impacted your business. I am certain that this is but the first of many communications we will enjoy. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to revisit the past and contribute to your future. Your friend, Carl Vaughn. Intrigued, Eric reached his hand deep into the bottom of the envelope, and his fingers found their prize, a round wooden token. He pulled it out and read the one word engraved into it: illuminate. According to Carl, this was supposed to be a business success tip, but Eric had no idea what it meant. But he was willing to do whatever it took to find out. Chapter 3. Illuminate. Monday morning, Eric woke early. He didn't need an alarm clock. The birds chirping outside did the trick, and there were plenty of them around the cabin. It was, after all, built to correlate with the wildlife and the surroundings. Showered and dressed, he hopped in his truck and set out to the job site. But first, he needed to stop at the coffee shop and get his usual: a large coffee, 1 cream, no sugar. As usual, the shop was busy with regulars, mostly guys like him stopping in to grab coffee and a breakfast sandwich or donut. He whipped his truck into a parking spot next to a much newer truck with a professional logo he recognized. Must be the crew building the apartment complex across the street, he thought, knowing they had a fleet of work trucks, a perk they were able to offer their employees. "Hey, Joe," he said, recognizing a carpenter who he'd gotten to know enough to speak to whenever they saw each other. "How's it going?" "Can't complain. And you? How's business treating you? Staying busy?" "Yeah, finishing up an edition this week. If you hear anything, though, I'd appreciate it if you'd let me know." "Will do, Eric," Joe replied. It was a courtesy his company sometimes extended. After all, the company was working on a big project, one that would take months to complete. They didn't have the time to mess with smaller jobs and were happy to pass them on to smaller businesses like Eric's that weren't a threat to their customer base. After stirring his coffee, Eric walked to the counter and paid for it. Deciding not to splurge on breakfast, he thanked the cashier and walked out the door. "Hey, Eric." Seeing Joe standing next to his truck, Eric walked over. "I almost forgot. Some of the fellows and I are going to stop at Smitty's Wednesday night to watch the game. You're welcome to join us if you'd like." "Wednesday? Sure, I'll try to make it. Thanks for asking me," Eric replied. "All right, see you then," Joe said before climbing into his truck and taking off. Thinking that it would be nice to get out of the house and hang out with the guys for a change, Eric drove to the job site. The shingles were strategically placed across the roof, ready to begin. Suddenly, Eric was glad he had lined up a couple of helpers. Roofing was hard work, especially when the afternoon sun was beating down. Sure, their wages would dip into his profits, but this was one time when it was worth it. Inside, he busied himself with mudding the drywall, hoping to make some headway before his workers came. They were two brothers, neither of whom had a full-time job. However, they were happy with side jobs. Whenever they needed a few bucks, they got the word out that they were looking for work. Eric had worked with them before and liked them. They did good work. They just lacked ambition. Thinking about that reminded him of the token, which at the last minute this morning he had slipped into his pocket. Illuminate. He really wished he knew what that meant. He didn't have a clue what Carl and his buddies were referring to. Pulling out the token, he looked at it quickly before climbing up the ladder. Maybe it will just come to me, he thought. The day passed quickly, just as it always does when you're busy. His helpers actually had to point out to him that it was quitting time. Looking at his phone, he saw that it was 5 o'clock on the dot. They are punctual, yes. Ambitious, no, Eric thought with a smile. "Thanks a lot, guys," he said. "We're just about done, so I can take it from here. I'll stop by and pay you after I run to the bank." Packing his tools, he secured the job site and headed to the nearest bank branch to cash a check. He was feeling productive and proud of a good, honest day's work until he saw the balance in his checkbook, a reminder that even taking pride in doing a good job was sometimes not enough. I need to get serious about figuring out how to boost my business. Maybe Carl and Grandpa's business gurus can help, if I put my mind to it. The token in his pocket was nagging at him. Illuminate. Maybe that meant he needed to advertise and promote his business better, kind of like Joe's company with their big white trucks and bright red logos. Anyone who drove past them could identify who they worked for. But Eric knew that was a catch-22. He couldn't afford those trucks and that kind of marketing until he started getting more work and bringing in more money. Again, he let the thought slide, hoping he'd somehow figure out this business tip and how it applied to him. Eric spent the next 2 days sanding the drywall and finishing the roof. On Thursday, he'd clean up and make his final inspection, ensuring that no detail had been overlooked. Standing back, he admired his work, knowing that the homeowner would be happy with it too. At the last minute, he almost decided not to join Joe and the guys at Smitty's, but then figured it might be a good idea. They all talked shop when they got together, and it might be a good way for him to pick up some leads on work. His calendar was wide open starting Friday. Showered and changed, he walked into the neighborhood sports bar, where he spotted Joe and a few others sitting at a table and surrounded by wall-to-wall televisions. "Hey, guys," he said, reaching out to shake hands. "Glad you made it, Eric. Sit down," one of them said, pulling a chair out. The group joked with the table next to them while watching the game for a while before talk turned to work. "You got anything lined up yet, Eric?" Joe asked. "No, not yet. I just wish I could figure out how to keep the work flowing without breaks. Don't get me wrong, something will come up. It always does. It would be nice to keep it steady, though. How do you guys always manage to have work?" "Hey, don't look at me. I don't get the jobs. I just do them. The guy you need to talk to is— Hey, Saul, come here, will you?" He yelled across to the next table. "Eric here has something to ask you." "Oh, no, that's not necessary," Eric said. But his argument was futile. Joe's boss, Saul, was already headed to their table. "Talk to Saul. He loves to talk business. I swear that's what he'd do 24/7 if he could." Joe laughed. "Here, he can have my seat. I'm going to go grab a sandwich." "Hello, Eric. Joe said you have a question. How can I help you?" "Well, it's really nothing. I was just talking to Joe and complaining about not having work lined up. I didn't mean for him to bother you," Eric said. "It's not a bother at all. So what's the problem?" "I don't know, really. I try to do my best, and my customers say they're very happy with my work, but it's a struggle to get the next job lined up. And then I usually have to reduce my costs or fees to be the low bid. I don't get it. My customers are happy. I always try to meet every deadline, and I do good work. I thought if you worked hard, took pride in your work, and aimed to please, the business would come. But after 8 years, nothing has changed." Well, Eric, I think you're onto something. Saul said. I am? Good. Tell me what it is, please. You're telling me everything that you're doing right, and that's all good. But there are a lot of construction companies, and I hope most of them are doing things right too. That means that you're no different from them, and you still haven't figured out what the problem is. Bingo. How can I do that? Listen to what I said. You haven't figured out what the problem is. Eric, you're focusing on everything that you're doing right, but if you want to find out why your business isn't growing, you should be doing the opposite, focusing on what you're not doing right. Huh? I don't get it, Eric said, confused. You know what you're doing right, son. That part is easy. But if you want to grow your business, you have to figure out why you're not getting the business. You already know why people want to hire you. Now you have to figure out why they aren't. Shine some light on that, and you'll have your answer. It was an aha moment, like a light bulb going on in his head. Eric got it. Illuminate. Carl and his rich friends weren't talking about billboards or neon signs. They were referring to something mental. He'd been so worried about making sure everything was right with his work that he hadn't even entertained the idea that anything could be wrong. If he could discover what things were wrong, he would then be able to fix them. Do you have any idea what some of these problems might be? He asked the older, wiser businessman. I've heard great things about your work, Eric. My guess is the problem doesn't have anything at all to do with what you do or how you do it. No, I'm willing to bet that the problem isn't in your talent or your skill. It's in your head. If you want your business to grow, you have to find the mindset that allows it to happen. It's all about focusing on what you don't know, learning about it, and eliminating your obstacles. Illuminate, Eric said. It means that I cannot grow until I figure out what's holding me back and addressing that first. It's kind of like saying, what you don't know can't hurt you, but in reality, what you don't know can hurt you. Excited, Eric quickly threw a tip on the table, shook Saul's hand, and thanked him profusely, and waved goodbye to Joe. He was in a hurry to get home and do some research on his laptop. It was time to shed some light and focus on what was holding him back. Only then would he be able to move past it and build a business his grandfather would have been proud of. And when he was done, he had an email to write to his friend, Carl Vaughn. Chapter 4. Confidence. That night, Eric emailed Carl Vaughn, letting him know that the first token he'd received was, indeed, opening his eyes and broadening his perspective. He mentioned that he wasn't quite sure where this illumination process would take him, but was excited to see what it would expose and how he could use the information to build his business. He spent the next day at Carl's cabin, pulling down some ceiling beams and floorboards that were in great shape. He was certain that he could integrate the pieces into his cabin in such a way that no one would be able to tell they hadn't been there since day one. It was part of the challenge and the beauty of what he did, making each construction project look as if no detail had been overlooked. As the day wound down, he walked back the narrow lane to his mailbox. Thumbing through his mail at home, he separated the junk mail from his bills, one of which caught his eye. It was a recurring bill for an ad he'd been running in a construction industry newsletter for the last year or so. Without thinking, he automatically reached into his pocket for his checkbook to pay the next installment, but then he hesitated. I wonder if I'm getting any return from this investment. Eric contemplated the answer to that question. Had he received any business from placing an ad in this publication, and if so, did it justify the cost? Each question seemed to spur another, and Eric knew precisely what he had to do. Illuminate. He had to find out what wasn't working before he could focus solely on what was working. Grabbing a pen and pad of paper, he listed all the new clients he'd taken on since he'd run the ad. What he learned was enlightening. He always asked new clients how they got his name, and none of them had mentioned the ad. It was quite telling. For one thing, he was advertising in a construction magazine, a publication homeowners weren't likely to see, and all of his clients had told him that they'd gotten his name from people they knew who had hired him in the past. All of his new clients had come from referrals, and any other jobs were from repeat customers who had been happy with his work. He'd had this information all along, but had faithfully renewed his ad hoping that it would attract clientele, and it hadn't. He wondered what to do with this information. Obviously, the advertisement wasn't in his best interest, but what was? If referrals were his most effective method of marketing, how could he get more? Then it hit him. What if he used the money he'd been spending on the ad to give his clients an incentive to refer him to their friends and relatives? It didn't have to be a lot, maybe $50 for each referral. but it would be a good way to show his appreciation for their loyalty and support.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?